Pray with me. O Lord, your servant Thomas Merton wrote, "You are at once Father and Mother. As Mother, your shining is diffused, embracing all creatures with merciful tenderness and light. The diffuse shining of God is Hagia Sophia, holy wisdom. We call her your glory. In Sophia, your power is experienced only as mercy and as love. Help us to remember that true power is love." Amen. Well, good morning. And happy Mother's Day to all of you who are mothers and who have mothers. You'll notice that it is also Good Shepherd Sunday. And so happy Sunday to all those good shepherds who are here today, who may be mothers to many. I think that about covers the population. When I was a young mother, it seemed to me that most days ought to be Mother's Day. With my 2 sets of twins under the age of 5, Mother's Day felt like every day. Each day was a gladiator event of movement that made me feel like a deity with 4 arms going in separate directions. Days that were perhaps less about celebrating and more about survival. Picking out a single day of the year to pay some kind of homage to being a mother felt, I don't know, maybe a little patronizing. As in, nice job. Here's some flowers. This should hold you for a year. There were mothering milestones that felt a little more authentic to me. First smile or step, first goal scored or graduation. Those events felt authentically celebratory. And yet, I'm glad we have a day to reflect together on mothering in all of its forms. I've never considered myself a feminist politically. I've never felt that my professional ambitions in the theater were being thwarted by a glass ceiling of men who wanted to control my ambition. The truth is, I wanted a family. And when I had children, I felt fortunate to be able to be a stay-at-home mother for a while. I have some shame admitting that while I most certainly benefited from the strides made by those women who were on the vanguard of the women's movement in the second half of the 20th century, I did not lean in with my voice in a way that I perhaps should have. Unexpectedly, it took going back to biblical times in my second career as a student of theology and now a chaplain priest to feel the indignity of the many important voices of the women who have been redacted out of the texts that were chosen for our biblical canon. When I went to seminary at the ripe old age of 50, I'm not sure I realized how inculcated my sense of a masculine God was until I was pulled up short by my Old Testament professor who threw red slashes through my gendered references to God as him. He wrote, "We use gender-neutral language when we refer to God." In the margins with huge red exclamation points. Okay, note taken. I did not make that mistake again. During my years in graduate school, I encountered feminist theologians like Elaine Pagels and Mary Daly, Sally McFay, Elizabeth Johnson, Catherine Keller, among many others, and they speak to a feminine idea of birthing as something new, a process by which God is coercive rather than directive, creative rather than mandating, and nurturing rather than admonishing. It feels to me that even in the years that have passed since my days at Union, the idea of feminist theology feels a little anachronistic. Mainstream theology acknowledges that the feminine voice embodied in the three persons of the Trinity is not revolutionary, not at all. It's ancient and available to anyone who looks beneath the top notes of sanctioned catechism. In his interview with Elaine Pagels in 1995, New Yorker's David Remnick wrote, Pagels makes it clear that early Christianity was far more complicated than anyone had ever imagined. A wildly diverse compendium of poems, chants, myths, gospels, pagan documents, spiritual instruction, texts that are distinct evidence of fierce theological debate, of an alternative tradition within early Christianity. In the Gnostic text, Pagel writes that the Divine Mother aligns along three main lines. First, she's a part of the original couple. Second, she is 1/3 of the Christian Trinity as spirit. And third, she represents wisdom and enlightens humans through her actions. I mean, we certainly see this in the imagery from today's gospel of the shepherd Jesus, who's also the sacrificial lamb, the gentle Messiah, whose sheep know him by the sound of his voice. The early Jesus movement was outside mainstream Judaism, and as such, they rejected purity laws and invited outcasts into their society, including Gentiles and women, and they were equal partners in this new imagining of community. Theologians note that the witness of Christians was experienced through the practice of this agape love. Love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, as Paul wrote in Galatians, were not just feminine virtues, but the fruits of new life in the Spirit. And there's also this reading today from the book of Acts, where Tabitha, who had been devoted to good works, was healed by Peter. Tabitha is one of the many named and certainly legions of unnamed women who were frankly the backbone of the early church. We have the archetype of Mary and Martha, the contemplative and industrious sister act. Then we hear about Apphia, Lydia, Nympha, Chloe. Paul commends Tryphena, Persis, Euodia, Syntyche, and of course, we know about Priscilla and Phoebe, who were particularly striking examples of female leadership in the early church. They were unable to be written out of the story entirely because of their outsized influence on the movement. There are legions of women throughout the Bible who have been prophets, seers, God-bearers, apostles, disciples, missionaries. Some have had children, some have been child-free, but all of them have given birth to new ideas and have created a path forward for agapic love that may be uniquely a part of the feminine heart. In Genesis, we're told the image of God is reflected in both man and woman. God is the breath that is the feminine ruach, and it embodied in the Proverbs in wisdom Sophia. God is housed within the three Marys and is heard in the voice of the prophets. She is the daily creativity that sustains Gaia Earth herself. She's a force that's generating, life-giving, dynamic instead of absolute and final. Wisdom is the prophetic female who does the work that is dangerous. Complex wisdom embraces the other to make something new. It has been years since I made the mistake of gendering God in a student paper. When I hear one of my patients refer to the divine nature as him, I admit a little thought bubble forms in my head that says, or her. When I think about the women who were written out of the story by men whose agenda may have been one of subjugation and dominance, I'll admit my irritation brings out the feminist in me. How might women have been regarded if those divinely inspired editors of the canon decided to include the secret gospel of John or the gospels of Thomas and Mary as a part of our Bible? Well, I'll leave that to you to ponder. Musician Bobby McFerrin wrote an alternative to Psalm 23 for his mother. It goes, "Surely, surely, goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in her house forever and ever. Glory be to our mother and daughter and to the Holy of Holies, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever, world without end." On this Mother's Day, let's celebrate the myriads of ways women have shown that creative wisdom, mercy, and love lie waiting to be ignited in every single one of us. Happy Mother's Day. Amen.